John 7:2. Erat autem in proximo dies festus Judaeorum, Scenopegia. But a holiday of the Jews called the Feast of Tabernacles was coming up. In this verse, we get some exotic vocabulary, a loan word from Greek. We also might take occasion to say something about dies and this nice Latin idiom in proximo. So first of all, autem here probably does have an adversative sense because of what follows. The very first thing that we should notice about this verse is that it's really the first part of a sentence, which is going to be completed in verse 3. So there's more coming here, and in the next video in sequence, we're going to pick up the rest of the sentence, and you'll see how this all fits together. But we can take this as it is, since it's just one verse, relatively quickly. So, but there was coming up in proximo. This is a very old Latin idiom. Proximus is actually the superlative of the Latin word propior, itself an adjective in the comparative degree from an even older word, an obsolete word, which went out of fashion pretty early in Latin that we don't need to talk about. Anyway, proximus from propior, nearer. Proximus is nearest, and that can be used in a spatial sense or as here in a chronological, or we might say temporal sense. And here the phrase simply means it's coming soon, it's near, and it's corresponding in the Greek NT text to angus, close by, approaching, near, something like that. So it means exactly the same thing. It's a very common expression, not to be confused with something else you might have heard. This is particularly popular in Latin-speaking circles. In proximum, especially if you say it by itself as a kind of exclamation, means basically the equivalent of English, see you next time. And in plus accusative there is indicating we're kind of looking forward to pushing our relationship ahead into the future. In proximum, I'll see you next time on the next occasion, or until next time, something like that. But what we have here, in proximo, means it's coming close, it's coming right up, it's approaching, it's right around the corner. Again, we might say idiomatically in English. So what was right around the corner? Again, we've got to link erat with this phrase. Dies festus, a festal day, day of celebration, a holiday, a solemn day for religious observances, that sort of thing. We might note in passing that while dies generally is masculine, and you can see that here in the form of the adjective, occasionally it doubles as a noun of the feminine gender, particularly in poetry, but you're not going to see that nearly so often as the masculine version of dies. Of course, the words mean basically the same thing regardless. You're not going to have any trouble in context distinguishing these things, but it's good to know ahead of time. So, Judaeorum, giving, of course, whose holiday it is. And then we get Scenopegia, and this is a word I can confidently tell you is not worth memorizing unless you're spending a lot of time in the Latin version of the Gospel of John, just because it appears only very rarely, and it refers to the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles. It's from a Greek word, Scenopegia, and I'm pronouncing it the Greek way, although actually we should note the first and second E are long in Latin, which means probably in Latin it would more correctly be said Scenopegia. But just to represent the original Greek word, since it's so close, it's such a one-to-one correspondence, we can pronounce it that way. So tabernacles, Feast of Tabernacles, and the Greek word skene, here tent or pavilion, lies at the root of this word, but we don't need to go too much further into it to understand what's going on here.